Hello, beautiful bastards. The name is Wolf, and welcome back to some last Epoch. This is a brand new build, my first attempt, proper attempt, at a Runemaster. I've never tried this before, but I have played his cousin, the Spellblade, in a very similar way, so I'm looking forward to the ultimate results. Now, as you can see visually at the gameplay, which is early leveling on the monolith, this is fairly early in the character's life, you can already see it is a visual spectacle, right? Like the explosions are wild already, and they're only going to become bigger and more frequent. It's going to be absolutely insane. So if you want to follow along, you can do so. There's time codes in the description box below, but otherwise also a last Epoch planner that will change as my understanding of the build improves, and of course the personal preference matures. So keep an open mind to changes. But yes, this is a build that is based around the Fragment of the Enigma. I loved this item ever since I made a guide with it 11 months ago, almost a year ago now, on a Spellblade. But now, of course, the game has changed. Many things that are a little different or completely different or are completely new to me specifically. For example, I've never made a build with the Mad Alchemist Ladle, which is an item that fits perfectly into this build, and we are also using it as a result. Although there are also wonderful alternatives, which we will discuss too. But yes, so far the build has been an absolute breeze to level with. It is a wonderful experience, incredibly visually pleasant. Assuming you can invest in a pair of sunglasses, because I imagine it's going to hurt some people's eyes. But having that said though, let's talk a little bit about the gear and the passive points and kind of what my thought process is, so that you may advise or celebrate or simply be inspired to make your own. So let's get into it. So let's talk a little bit about the gear then. The start of the show, Fragment of the Enigma. The big note here is, of course, lightning damage for spark charges, plus the spark charges that are being applied. Very powerful. We're not using a melee attack like I do on the Spellblade, since we are using the Mad Alchemist Ladle. Now, on both of these items, you want cast speed if you can help it, some spell crit, crit multi, anything that is like a good damage mod, preferably exalted, and as many as you can possibly push for the max amount of value. But I do prefer spell crit, crit multi, and cast speed if possible. However, if you don't want to use the Mad Ladle, because it is very hit and miss, and even I might still switch depending on what the future brings, you never know when you're going to get a 4 LP drop after all. The Dracorov's Claw looks very interesting to me. I wonder if anybody has some advice on this, because as you can see, all res, spell crit, ward gain, like lightning blast. If I was a Spellblade, I'd be using this with Mana Strike. But I guess I could also do that on the actual Runemaster that I'm running right now, and I don't have to go melee. I could go and put cast speed on other items and then try to get it through that. Who knows? Maybe that's an option. But yeah, there's more base crit as well, bunch of spell damage. This is a very good alternative, but you have to adjust your build accordingly. But lightning blast, very good. Very good. But yes, speaking of base crit being improved as well, prismatic gaze, as you can see here, base crit, some crit chance, a little bit of elemental tank. If we can, intelligence, first and foremost. We are instackers after all. The prism shard stuff doesn't quite work, because we are never going to cast a skill that costs more than 40 mana if we do it right. With all the reductions we might be able to push. Aside from that, unstable core. We want this because of the max mana, elemental damage, and levels. We are very stretched thin on levels. We need every single one we can get. And the mana is important because we have some idols that rely on 300 max mana being present, at least. We are picking up the double opal ring for attribute stacking and a little bit of comfy cooldown. On top of that, we want intelligence, lightning damage, and whatever resistances you might need. As you can see, I'm capped without maxing all the resistances out. And I keep that in mind simply because of the fact that I want to maybe run Weaver items. The belt here, for example, is really nice. If you can get like a nice Weaver item with lightning damage and then maybe some other good mods like cooldown reduction or big resistances, this opens up a world of possibilities for you. But yeah, Weaver items are the definition of gambling, so it may vary from person to person. There is an alternative unique that is really good that I also am hunting. Where is it? It's the Strands of Souls, which is essentially the big boy version, but you would need an LP with a big lightning damage, and then as you can see, possibly up to 180% of mana spent gain this ward retention, ward per second, ward on kill, ward gain on potion use. It's just a really good belt for us if we could run it. But if not, Communion of the Erased is a very good alternative. I'm still using this on life, and I love it. Before I forget the accessories, we also have a silver amulet. You can run whatever you want here. The implicit is not too strong with that small amount of crit. If you have, for example, a big crit chance on your both your items here, who knows? You can also run the actual silver amulet for the crit chance. We are, however, looking for a nice spell crit, exalted preferably, some crit multi, and maybe some shred armor, and whatever resistances are needed to round off what you still need. Speaking of Weaver items, you could maybe get very lucky and find yourself with a Weaver item on the Solaran Bracers. Like, if you can get, like, intelligence, cast speed, and, like, a good resistance on a Weaver item, use it. It's best in slot. I'm not even joking. It has attributes on it. It has some good, strong modifiers on it. The Weaver item is just incredible. Like, Swaddle of the Erased. Look at that. More spell damage, the low health, increased cast speed, attribute. It has everything we need. So if we could stack on top of that intelligence, more cast speed, and like resistances we may need, perfect. 10 out of 10. But that's also one of the reasons I keep some of my rings open, because if I don't hit the resistance, I could still use a Weaver item and still be capped, right? Keep that flexibility. Otherwise, Solaran Braces are really good for the armor and crit, or otherwise, if you want to be a little bit more tanky without losing too much damage at all, you could also go for a... where is it? The Eternal Gauntlets. Very, very good. Lots of armor. Armor mitigation also applies to damage over time, which can help you against those pesky dots or that you might not be able to cleanse, or like ground effects that are damage over time. Very lovely. Citadel boots are unfortunately kind of mandatory, unless you can get maybe like a really good exalted crit reduction. Maybe then you can go with a Weaver boot if you wanted to, or a Blood of the Exile. People have been using that as well. There's another good unique. If Blood of the Exile doesn't work, you can also go with the Telfun's Mirage. They're essentially just int buffs, as you can see. They're just there for the movement speed and the int. So if you have like a lot of LP on it, you can make it a proper boot. Otherwise, Citadel boots, intelligence, movement speed, crit reduction. Combine that with the passive, of course, and an affix. You are going to be crit immune, which is going to be very, very comfy. And then also maybe some cooldown reduction. Very lovely. Not necessary if you have double opal rings, as opposed to maybe a Weaver ring, which you could also use, mind you. And of course, if you want to get more haste, a nice experimental haste is going to be very, very comfy. It also allows you to maybe change out your skills, or maybe save some points on the ward, or use something completely different. Speaking of the Weaver ring, I just love the Weaver items as of like, look at that, elemental res, and then increased health and mana, which is comfy. Mana spent gained as ward, and then like a ward mechanic. So if you have like a really good font of the Erase with like intelligence and some good resistances, lightning damage, use it. Best in slot, don't even care, go for it. Well, it's not best in slot. You can also go for the chase items, I suppose, like the red ring of Adlaria. You could do that. But that's like, you know, the mage blood of last Epoch. Same thing with the the Omnis right here. It's like the mage blood of last Epoch, right? Like, it's chase items. You can't base them on it unless you have them, in which case use them. They're really, really good for this build. Having that said though, idols, let's talk about that. The only two that are mandatory are the mana efficiency with frost affixes 1 and 2. The best damage mod we can get is the increased lightning damage. Effect is doubled at 300 more mana. So that's why we have 300 mana. We can pick them up on the big ones, but also on the medium ones. And then you can get whatever you want. Lightning crit is pretty good to get on these. But whatever is necessary, use that first and foremost. These minor and smaller idols are very flexible. If you have armor, if you have mana, use it. If you need resistances, use it. Make your build work, then make it work better. Other than that, the blessings are very heavy on the resistances, because if you hit big resistances on your Weaver items or on your LP slams, then perhaps you can optimize your blessings, right? For now though, I'm using void resistance and all res for ease of gearing, and having that flexibility for potential Weaver items and LP slams. Armor, more fizz res, and then also some shred lightning. Very simplistic. Having that said, let's go to the passives. This is where some flexibility is also expected. We have 8 out of 8 Arcanist, 2 for the travel node into Mage Flurry, and 5 points for the crit multi and crit chance. Very, very rudimentary. The Sorcerer, 5 points Arcane Momentum, so we allow ourselves to get 6 stacks of Essence of Celerity out of 8. We're also picking up the point bonus with this, which is very, very comfy, allows us to move a little bit faster. I love speed on this build, and of course the max intelligence. If you don't want to pick up the Void of the Hunger blessing right here, you can pick up in the passive tree, 1 point of Ceronomancer, I don't know how to pronounce that, and then 5 points of Rift Bolt for Lightning Pan and Lightning Damage Leech. Now, why is the Leech important? If you're planning to run the Twisted Heart of Alkeros, which is, by the way, required with the Frostclaw. I almost forgot to mention that. Frostclaw is very important. More important than intelligence. As you can see, though, it consumes current health to replace it with ward. So, having that said, we need a little bit of sustain, and Leech is a very cheap way of doing that, especially since the penetration here also improves our damage considerably. In terms of Runemaster, though, we are picking up 5 unsealed mana, and that gives us access to Arcane Focus, which we max out for intelligence. 5 points to get the Cataclysm Rune Ward here on crit, and we crit often. We're also picking up 1 point of Neverlate, and then 3 points of Rune of Dilation, which increases our cast speed and movement speed after traversal, which is very, very lovely. With all the cooldown reduction we get in this build, either through gear or the intelligence scaling through a later node, we actually will have 3 seconds or lower movement abilities, so we can keep this buff up permanently if we wanted to, for the sake of moving through Monolith. Very comfy. 6 points of Mental Catalysis, more intelligence since we are using a catalyst, as well as the crit reduction. 6 points of Edict of Scion for the area and ward, and then 6 points because we are using a wand. Now, if you want to use the dagger that we talked about, the dragon dagger, or the rune dagger, you can not use this because there's no dagger version of this, right? So you want to spec out of these 6 points and replace them elsewhere to maybe where you want them. If you need the travel nodes, you could probably pick them up in Transcendence or something, or double down on maybe some other stuff. It is entirely up to you. I don't know yet because I haven't experimented with it yet, but maybe I will in the future. We also want to pick up 5 points of Brand of Deception. This is important for later. 10 points of Ancient Inscription, at least 8 for the point bonus, as much as you can understand that, because that's cooldown recovery speed per 4 intelligence, duh. 1 point of Rune Ward Hurricane, because we are a lightning build after all. This is where the brands come in. Celestial Doom, very, very important, because ward gain versus branded bosses and spell damage to branded bosses, really, really lovely. So this is automated, and then this just automatically becomes awesome. And then 5 points of Jagged Veil. As you can see, it's crit multi and more ward gained on crit, which is phenomenal. Very powerful. Now, having that said, though, let's go through the skills. The primary skill, as you can see, we are stretched very thin. 26 is definitely the minimal I would want to run with it. You can get away with a little less, but it's going to feel very awkward. You might have to start sacrificing points in Celestial Conflux, which is the node that we need for the Elemental Nova trigger. We're also turning it into lightning as opposed to fire. Lightning, of course, being the primary element of this build, which gives us access to Spark of Celerity, which makes sense because this build buffs the cost of Frostclaw considerably, so we need some mana efficiency. Speaking of, we are reducing the cost here with Gift of Winter, and we're reducing the cost with Frozen Rain. We do go through 1 point of Fen of the Frozen. The reason why we do this is because we can then pick up Bright Frost for Cleanse. Then we have Hand of Moritus, which is extra projectiles, more sparks. And then Volley of Glass. This allows us to essentially have real single target. Because without this, our single target is considerably worse, unless there's AoE potential around the target. So be wary of that. The reason why our single target is so good is because when we go through Shiver Shell, which I believe is better than another point in Rending Cascade due to the cast ward gain, we can pick up Glamdring, 1 point in Cold Star, and then we have On Through the Snow, Ever Onward, Frozen Malice, and the Crack in the Eyes. All of these are kind of responsible for that cascading effect and homing effect, essentially, for Frozen Claw. And all of these can trigger the Elemental Nova through Celestial Conflux. And as they pass through units, they can actually apply multiple times. Like, it's all kind of interactive. It's really good. All of this combined gives us massive triggers for Spark Charges and any kind of like Elemental Novas, which trigger Spark Charges. Speaking of Elemental Nova, as you can see, is we're picking up on the left, enable the Ice Nova, and then we go all the way up to Cryomatic Fragility, which makes the Elemental Nova free. We're going to go down here, Infernal Nova, to get 250% area. We're circumventing the cooldown since we're not casting it. We are triggering it, so it's massive benefits for everybody involved. It also allows for the Ignite duration to be increased, which might help for the Ignite chance, which then allows, of course, the trigger of the Wand to happen for more spell damage taken. Very, very comfortable. We're also triggering the Lightning Nova because we have 5 out of 5 Spark Charges here for 100% Spark Charge with more damage. And then we have 5 points of Elemental Expanse for another 100% area. So you can see why they're so big. And then you have 2 options. You can either take the crit chance here for more crits, which makes more passive shenanigans happen. Of course, the passive crit gain. Or you can just go for more triggers on the overcharge for greater area and shock chance. But that's up to you. This is like the one flexible point that I have here. In terms of movement, we're using Flame Rush, since we are using Cold Fire Cold Invocation, so we need to use Flame Rush. As you can see, it is cold converted. On the left here, we are picking up every single buff and buff effect that we can find, as well as every single cooldown reduction and mana efficiency. We're picking up all the speed and range, and then we pick up 1 point of Ember Wake and a little faster charge, just because the hits that these do also can trigger, potentially, Spark Charges. But you have some flexibility there. I don't think you really need this point. For example, if you want to pick something else up, by all means, hop off. But yes, in terms of the Flame Ward, we are keeping it fire. You could convert to cold if you want to keep your hotkeys in a certain way. That's what I'm doing. But yes, the big note that I'm in love with, haste, gain haste, Flame Runner, very good. Like I said, this buff is going to help your character stay healthy, or not healthy, but speedy, combined with all the other movement skills, as well as the movement actual ability that keeps you moving. Very good for monoliths. We pick up the duration and mana efficiency. To do so, 3 points as well, and then 4 points here for simply the travel note. We're going up here for 2 Stalwart Defense, giving us access to Desperate Defense, Fuel the Flames into 1 extra charge. Very comfortable to have an extra charge. It does recharge once while you have spent 1 but still have 1, so that second one is charging. So you can have like this nice little continuous charging effect happening, and we have a lot of cooldown reduction, so this is very good. Even though we are increasing the cooldown, doesn't matter. Yes. We're still awesome. Barrier for 40% less hit damage, because mages are tanks now, and then another minus 30% elemental damage taken during the Flame Ward. So if you time this correctly, you can tank some incredible game mechanics that you would otherwise have to move out of the way for. Very, very good. And then Runic Invocation. Of course, we are Runemasters. It looks a little weird, perhaps, but I have optimized it based on what I've been able to encounter. Here on the left side, we pick up 1 Arcane Battery. Combine this with 3 points of Copied Scrolls and 3 points of Runic Energy. You end up with 101% rounded down to trigger a guaranteed double cast. Because Frozen Claw is so expensive because of all these things down here, it's going to be more than 10 mana. So it triggers this Arcane Battery very, very fast, and thus overrides the need for waiting, while still being able to have 100% copycast, essentially, the duplicate. So it's very, very lovely. Some people spec this fully, but you can't get like a triple cast. It only copies once. I've been testing this, I've confirmed this, so I'm not sure why people are speccing into it, because we're not using a damage invocation, we're using the shield invocation, Cold Fire Cold. We're picking up the Immutable Order. This is how we're going to guarantee our Cold Fire Cold, because if you look at the action bar, Flame Rush is cold, Flame Ward is fire, and then we have Snap Freeze, which is not spec'd, But it's a really nice option to have on your bar to get cold, because it's also a really good CC that can just CC bosses for like a moment. Very comfortable. On top of that, we are picking up ward gain and mana refunded. We only take 2 points in adept runescribing. I don't even think we need it, because the 4 points in transcribe of power lasts for 12 seconds. The buff we have is 13 seconds. So as long as our cooldown of runic invocation is technically below 12 seconds, we're going to have permanent uptime on all these buffs. So if you want to get more cooldown because you want to have the ability to click, by all means. The ward burst is nice, the ward regen is comfy, but the buff remains active for 12 seconds over here, and the actual cold fire cold invocation remains active for 13 seconds. So you don't need, much more than that, as long as you can override it. We are picking up 3 points of inscribed patterns, just because value. You can take points out of here and maybe spec them into Attuned Approach if that's what you want. It depends on how your mana is. I do think Attuned Approach is the safer bet. But up to you, depending on how your items end up being. And then we go all the way down here as efficiently as possible to get Elemental Starfield, because Elemental Novas are those big explosions. And then when we use invocations, we get more explosions, which of course makes it good. Like, it's very, very nice. There's just more spark charges around you, which is very good. Helps with AoE clear, helps with single target, get some overlaps. Very lovely, right? And that is pretty much it for the build. Like I said, this is an experimental version. I am looking into different items, different Weaver items, different uniques. The Rune Dagger remains on my mind. I don't know if that's just me being silly, but I like the Lightning Blast. It has a lot of potential. So, follow me or don't, but be warned, if you do, it is experimental, things will change. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Have a good night, take care, and I will catch you guys on the next video or on the stream, as you can see me mess around with the build live. Have a good night. I'm out!